Hi Tristam, welcome to our podcast today. If you can just share with people who you are and what it is you do.
Yeah, sure, Kenny. Good to be here. Thanks for the invite. I'm Tristam Horn, energy entrepreneur. I was a former drilling engineer, went into the entrepreneurial space in 2015 when I started Delta Tech. That journey went on for 8 years up until the acquisition by Expro, and I'm now the Expro's senior product line manager for all of the legacy Delta Tech products. So 2.5 years into that Expro chapter.
Perfect. And pre-Delta Tech, what was it you did? Were you a cement engineer or drilling engineer? What did you do?
Engineer's generous
Is that a stretch?
title, I'd say, but
Okay.
no, I was officially I was a drilling engineer.
Okay.
So I did usual kind of mechanical engineering at university, and then decided to go and get a job at the end of that exciting chapter down in Newcastle, and applied for a number of graduate schemes, and I'd actually applied for a subsea engineering scheme at BP.
Okay.
Came up to Aberdeen for the assessment centre, and post-assessment centre the recruiter had said to me, "You're going to be a drilling engineer." And I said, "What's a drilling engineer?" And they explained a little bit about it, and rather than taking the subsea route, which I was intending on doing, I went into drilling, and
You did what you were told.
as always,
Yeah.
I've learnt that I've got a contract now that I need to do as I'm told on my left ring finger. So
Perfect.
getting good at it.
So from that, you became a drilling engineer. You then identified an issue or an opportunity within cementing in that area.
Yeah, I'd always had sort of entrepreneurial aspirations.
Okay.
I remember even in my BP assessment centre that I described a new solar panel which I was planning on going and commercialising when I was a teenager, which obviously never went anywhere because I just didn't get after it, right? But I always had entrepreneurial aspirations, and yeah, during that tenure as a drilling engineer and running around the industry doing well construction, I became privy, like we all do in well construction, that there's a number of challenges and inefficiencies and opportunities for improvement. And over my career there, I kind of gained enough confidence that in 2015, when the oil price crashed and everybody was talking about new ways of working, and
That was the opportunity.
that was the kind of light bulb moment as to, well, hell, if everybody's talking about we've got to do things better and we've got to get leaner and more efficient, I thought that kind of dovetailed with.
And was it a couple of years to 2015? Was it a couple of years of just R&D and development before you actually commercialized the product, or were you commercializing that product pretty quickly?
No, it was initially it was a couple of years of complete fish out of the water as to being an engineer to jumping into the entrepreneurial space with zero experience.
Yeah.
It was actually just figuring out what does a business plan look like, and figuring out what does that journey look like from.
So how did you fund that initial couple of years?
Yeah, so I piled heavy in on all of the share schemes as you do in a big
Yeah.
stock exchange listed company like like BP was. So I cashed all that in to start off initially. House was already mortgaged to 95% or whatever it is that you can get.
Stop calling that.
I'm a very, very debt hungry individual, and if you can get debt, that's my favorite topic. But so I plowed in as much as I could initially, but and we'll all remember that 2000 late 15, 16.
Yeah.
Oil and gas was still the sweetheart of the Scottish economy.
Very much. We were reliant on it. Yeah.
100%. We all remember the SNP's
Yeah.
independence referendum was pretty much hinged on the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
So Scottish Enterprise, Business Gateway, the Oil and Gas Technology Centre was seeing some early shoots.
So there's grants and funding available.
There was a lot of support. Yes, there was a lot of grants, a lot of funding available, which alongside my sort of personal chuck-in was enough to figure out what to do from a business planning respect when I was taken under the wing at Business Gateway over in Bridget on there. That I learnt about how to pitch, learnt about how to kind of go and access some of these pools of support that were available in order just to kind of keep things going. But that on its own wasn't enough, right? R&D isn't cheap, so there was an element of bare bones in your arse and figuring out how you're going to kind of keep food on the table for your family. So I did end up needing to go back as a consultant for a while.
Yeah.
In early 2017, when it really was kind of make or break moments.
Shit in the fan.
It really was. Yeah, I'm glad you said it, not me.
Yeah. No, I experienced that a lot. So it's part of the developing your business. We spoke to somebody else on this podcast as well, and there's a company that's doing very well, and they mentioned they were literally you know, they now have 280 plus staff, and they were days for going out of business. So it happens to everybody.
Yeah, and
Part of the process or part of the story, I guess.
totally. And like, I mean, the business basically had zero expenditure, right? I wasn't paying myself. We didn't have any premises. It was purely just applying for IP, which, you know,
is that expensive? Is that a
very
time
much
process? Or?
Right. Well, all relative. Yeah. Actually, toward the sort of latter stages of Delta Tech, after personnel, IP was our next biggest expense.
What's the process for doing that? Or when did you realize this is, you know, we need to do this to protect our business or whatever?
Yeah, and like I obviously done quite a bit of research around, you know, how do you kind of go through this journey of you know, concept through to commercialization, and recognizing that, you know, IP is a fundamentally important part of that. I knew it was going to become part of it, and when I was forming the kind of founding team of Delta Tech with my two business partners, Dave and Steve. Steve's background was very heavy on the IP, and he was a superb chief technology officer who handled a lot of that process of, you know, drafting patent applications and interfacing with our.
Is that timely? Is that, you know, is that a year, 2 years?
Yeah,
3 months?
There's, I guess, from kind of concept through to, you know, having a drafted patent application. It's all obviously just down to the horsepower that you put in, right? And you know, the team that we had in Delta Tech was nimble and very passionate about it. So we'd maybe be able to turn a draft patent application around in a couple of months.
Okay.
The process thereafter for, you know, applying for that initially, you get your initial kind of date line in the sand. This is where we're going to take our priority from. You know, to actually get a grant, you'll be talking years thereafter, right?
Yeah.
So,
but you know, it's been doing that. That's where the value in the business is.
Completely. Like, I mean, when we went through the acquisition process by Expro, you know, many years, obviously after the sort of inception of Delta Tech and some of that early IP, we had in the region of 55 open patent files.
Wow.
You know, many of them not granted, of course, but many of them granted, and that was a huge motor, big value for.
With these similar products, all your products have got similar names. What's the difference in technology with these products?
Yeah, so we had like the sort of central technology of Delta Tech in the cementing part of it being Secure, which was our kind of proprietary stabbed in inner string cementing system. But around that, as we were going through the process of deploying this, there was a lot of eureka moments of, well, hell, if we're doing this, then surely we could do that as well. And that would give us the impetus to go and, you know, apply for patent protection on that. So, you know, some of the things that kind of obviously spring to mind are the heat sweep process, where we've just done a successful Secure job and we're just now sitting there doing nothing, waiting, literally on the report, waiting on cement. That's literally what it's called. And that can be, you know, many hours. And it was then the concept of, well, if we're sat there circulating, why don't we just heat it up? You know.
And for doing that, were you hired on a day rate? So you're quite happy to sit there, or were you hired on a project?
Yeah, and it's a good point, because we tested different business models out and ultimately kind of wanted to make it as easy as possible for our customers. You know, I at one stage was a customer for what this ultimately would have become, right? So, you know, I remember sifting through service company invoices where, you know, every single line item and quantity is, you know, when you get the first draft of that through, you think, Christ, when have I got 2 hours in my calendar to review that?
Just to look at this.
And you think, God, so I was keen to make it as simple as possible.
Easier to get sign off and get paid.
Right, precisely.
Yeah.
Like we all know, as small businesses, cash is king. You've got to get that cash flow going. So we had a pretty simple business model of, you know, lump sum, that's it. With obviously some pricing notes to kind of make sure that everybody's aware of, you know, the boundaries of that business model. But yeah, lump sum was kind of what was favored by clients. And you know, ultimately they then knew, hey, this is how much I'm going to pay for this. And it's pretty obvious what the value is. Yeah. They could then make that assessment as to whether or not they wanted to kind of proceed with it. So rather than they themselves going and doing that calculation as to, well, I've got widget X, Y, Z, quantity, 1, 2, 3, multiply it, you know, they would have to go through that process of ultimately coming to that same kind of bottom line figure as to then
Spending
decide.
a lot of time doing it.
Correct. And want to make, you know, one of the early things I realized is you've got to make your customers' life as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Support them in that kind of new technology adoption process, because it is mind-blowingly difficult to get a kind of status quo technique, albeit without competition, displaced for a new technique.
How difficult is that then? Because you're going from BP to Delta Tech. You're a new business, startup. Nobody knows who you are. I mean, you've got a network there, you've got to push it out, but nobody knows your brand and everything else. I remember speaking to you guys really early on, maybe 2017 or 2018, offshore Europe and things like that, when you were just trying to push that brand and working with a local PR company.
That's right.
But how do you take it from there and start to get work after a year, 2 years of R&D?
Yeah, and there's no getting away from the fact that it's just a lot of hard work, you know.
Yeah.
Maintaining a disciplined approach to engaging with your customers, knowing when to back off, knowing when to continue. You know, so like, I mean, the very first.
Let's get to the point where you've run out of your own money, you've run out of grant money or whatever, or you're getting close to it. You'll be well aware of it, and you're thinking, "Fuck, I just need to get a project here. We need to get work." Yeah. So pushing back or holding off and waiting on your client, that's all nice, but at some point it gets to the point where you just need to fucking work.
You do, right? And it kind of, you know, a lot of good fortune often shrouds these stories, right? And there very much was that with the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, now Net Zero Technology Centre, but in 2017 when it was getting going, it was obviously OGTC, right?
Yeah.
And that helped put a good framework in between these technology developers, the little SMEs like that we were at Delta Tech, and the potential users of those technologies, the oil companies, right? So Chevron being one, Siccar Point being another early adopter of our technology, the two of those side by side, sort of were co-parties to that OGTC framework of, we want to go and deploy new technologies. And
so without OGTC, would Delta Tech be here, or would it still be running as Delta Tech itself?
Great question.
Would it be part of Expro?
Good questions, Kenny. We're you know, in the beauty of hindsight, we're
who knows?
Who knows, right? Who knows? But it certainly made it easier, right? Like, I mean, I consider myself a pretty sort of tenacious, perseverant individual that doesn't give up, which sometimes goes against me, right? Some people call me incredibly annoying sometimes, right, with my early business development journey. But you know, I think, I don't know, have that.
But you don't need to be like that.
There very much is, right?
Yeah.
There very much is. It certainly made it significantly easier with the OGTC, right? They put a little bit of cash in, they funded it for the operator, so the operator wasn't financially exposed.
Yeah.
And they put that kind of logic style, you know, neutral hold harmless framework in place such that it made it, you know, legally easy for them just to sign up. And we were then able to go and put the technology in field trial and down a well for them and then prove it up. But on the flip side of that, you know, there was also the kind of almost mandated testimony from the end users. So, you know, our early works with Chevron and Siccar Point Energy, I'm sure that they would have done it anyway because they're just fantastic individuals that were involved in those real pioneers of the industry. I'm talking the Colin Higginses, the Grant Stevens, the Liz Witts, those early adopters of our technology.
Yeah.
But they were then on camera doing
promoting the
Secure saved us 8 hours of rig time, you know, and
selling it for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I distinctly remember an interview which the OGTC facilitated with Colin over at Siccar Point where, you know, he was incredibly kind and profound with his testimony of Secure being the most robust, reliable engineering technique to deliver his primary cement job. It's like, oh wow, you know, and they're then into Ithaca, or ultimately, you know, all commingled into Ithaca.
And what was the alternative then before you?
Basically doing it open-ended.
Okay.
So without getting too much into the weeds, there was a technique that, you know, kind of had worked. There's no doubt about it. It worked for decades.
Yeah, just a more long-winded.
Slightly more long-winded, yeah. You've got to kind of wait for, well, in terms of the actual primary placement, it's a little less efficient. You've got a huge volume that you've got to kind of place and displace. And then when you displace it, there's not as much reliability in the system. Plus, like you say, it's a bit more long-winded.
So the product you developed, you watched that process many times. What was the kind of lightning bolt thing that you saw that you thought, I know what I can do here?
Yeah, and there was, I guess, a number of kind of contributory moments of there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way. Like, I mean, you know, having been involved in well construction projects all over the show, from the Gulf of Mexico, West Africa, the UK, there are different challenges, right? So, you know, in some areas there would be challenges which contributed to not getting a casing pressure test, which would be a bit of a lunch eater. That'd be maybe a 4-day non-productive time event.
Yeah.
There'd be some instances where, you know, you just got a long wait on cement, you know, 16, 18 hours of just sitting there holding the thing, just waiting for it to cure. And in pretty much all of them, there's an efficiency optimization just in placing the cement properly. There's areas of the world where they exclusively do stabbed in inner string cementing. And it was kind of like intuitive as to, well, if you're doing it there, why don't you do it here?
Yeah.
But it was just bridging that gap, right? And hey, look, it was conversations with a number of kind of participants in that process as to, well, if you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to think of this. And then when you piece it all together, you then kind of see the full solution.
Yeah.
That's when it's like, well, actually, we've got something pretty useful here.
Valuable.
Very valuable, right? And customers kind of reported that, and that was the kind of, right, let's go out and try and do something about this.
Yeah. And so eventually Expro chapped on your door, I guess. Where was Delta Tech at that point?
So over the course of our kind of early commercialization, in 2018, we did our first trial deployment of this tech. In 2019, we then did quite a few.
Okay.
As you kind of expect, you get the trial done.
All
that
UKCS?
Mostly UKCS, yeah. The first 3 UKCS jobs gave the impetus to our first kind of overseas client.
Where was that?
That was in Israel for Energy N. So another true pioneer of the industry, Simon French.
A company that's came from nowhere over the last 10 years.
Completely.
Unreal.
Yeah, now, market leader in that part of the world.
Yeah, Greece, Israel, all of that.
Totally.
Yeah, fantastic.
And from the kind of Delta Tech angle, like, I mean, they've obviously got full kind of, integrated upstream business, right? But, in the wells space, which is obviously one part of that significant entity, their now head of wells, Simon French, he's just, like I say, he's just another pioneer, another truly passionate individual that wants to make the industry better.
Yeah.
And after a couple of early deployments, he took the leap to give Delta Tech a shot in his deep water development campaign. So, I'll forever be grateful for Simon for taking that leap. And, ultimately they've become a terrific user adopter of the Cure technologies. Yeah. And it's been nicely dovetailed with Expro, because Expro's got a lot of complementary technologies which those customers have utilized. But in terms of answering where were Delta Tech on that kind of journey of commercialization when Expro came a chapping, we've done really, really well in the UK. We were a UK kind of centered business, like you say. We took on a local PR firm here. They did a superb job of networking us in amongst the sort of the local customers here. And we were pretty well known around here. Like you say, I had a good network. My business partners had great networks in the UK, and we were in amongst all the customers. And it was a relatively tight-knit customer pool, whom, neatly communicated with each other. So they were communicating this success almost for us. We were just facilitating all that and keeping a disciplined approach on our CRM to make sure that everybody were aware of what was happening, the deployments, the successes, the testimonies.
All processes, everything where you were, yeah?
Correct, yeah. And ultimately where we got to, so 2019, we were pretty quickly into around about 30% of the UK market. 2020 came, which was obviously COVID, right? So that was another chapter.
Challenge, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bottle of wine chapter. I think that's
How was COVID for you?
horrendous.
Okay, it's good. For everybody, I think the same, yeah.
Yeah, personally, I'd had some challenges on the not being able to access a mortgage as an entrepreneur, so I had a growing family, and I've needed to cater to that. So I had to actually sell my owned house, albeit 90% mortgage, whatever. But I had to move into a rental, and there was another whole chapter there, which ended, thankfully, after about 18 months, mutually acceptably. But at the time, it was very, very challenging. I was nearly getting evicted and But that was all happening in parallel to the business going through COVID, which, we had 16 contracts to deploy our technology on March 25th when Boris Johnson obviously, came on TV and told us that we're all to stay at home.
Yeah.
And within the space of about a week, that went to 1. Everything went force majeured or delayed or, cancelled.
Was that just travel and everything else? You couldn't get the products out? Because I remember right at the start, there was still, some of your clients were still sending people away.
Yeah.
They were taking, I think one of your clients was doing stuff in Australia, and it was something like 6 weeks just the mobilization of there and back, never mind the actual the work in the middle. So the cost of that, the time for that, for SMEs, that's a big expense to have people in hotels just sitting there doing nothing, waiting to travel, doing the same coming back.
Yeah.
It's a big cost.
For us, I think it was actually just the fact that our clients basically said, look, we've got well activity. A lot of our work was new well delivery.
Yeah.
So, there is obviously a lot of mobilization involved in that, a hugely international business. And because that kind of came to a grinding stop, our clients basically said, look, we're going to either defer or cancel this scope. which meant that it all got kicked out. And on the lump sum nature of the business model, it didn't, even though stuff had maybe gone, it was like, well, we can't even invoice it.
Yeah.
So cash was suddenly a kind of an issue. And my kind of list of clients that we had, and when I did that, right, they'll probably stay, they'll probably go, they'll probably stay. Like, never follow me into a queue in a supermarket. I get it wrong way more than 50%. And sure enough, this was another classic example of that. My kind of top of the list of keep was
Guaranteed work.
Guaranteed work was Energy N, which was the big one. They had 4 wells to deliver. They'd signed a 10-year kind of gas commitment with the Israeli government on funding, on keeping their gas plants going. And I thought, yeah, that's a definite yes. And very, very bottom of that list was open the stock market on the Monday morning, 87% down was Premier Oil. And I thought, no, it's a definite no-go. Sure enough, complete opposite way around, right? Energy N said, sorry guys, we need to delay this. Premier Oil said, let's get going.
Yeah, we're fucked anyway.
I got it wrong. I got it completely wrong. So, so the Premier job, that went ahead in April on the Transocean Leader west of Shetland. So a bit of revenue to kind of keep the wolves from the door for a month or so, but not a great deal. But it was enough just to kind of fend it whilst
the world kind of adjusted to COVID.
And whilst I was kind of, working with my business partners on, a new business plan, basically, and applications to, the banks and the usual, the C-bills, the furloughs, all of that kind of stuff, working all hours to try and figure all of this out and pull it all together. And, we presented the business case of, look, we had a really good business last year. It's been completely knocked on the head due to COVID.
What was the turnover of your business pre-COVID?
The turnover. Pre-COVID, we were about $1.4 million in 2019. We took a little dip in 2020.
Yeah.
But it was meant to be like a times 3 year, right? So it completely wasn't. It was a dive, right? So, but with the contracts, at least it was pointing to a big growth year.
Yeah.
Yeah. COVID certainly kind of gave us all a good haircut there. Yeah. But look, we recovered ultimately, right? And when all these projects then started coming back onto customers' drilling schedules, we were like picking them back up, and keeping the service quality up and keeping the growth story kind of going. And in 2022, a bit of a product of the UK CS slowing down, but also the good use of the technology.
Yeah.
Secure was used by 80% of the UK CS subsea market, so huge market share.
You must be pretty proud of that.
Really proud, super proud. Like, it would be great if it was 80% of a bigger pool, don't get me wrong, but it was what it was. But that was a great point for, potential acquirers to be coming and knocking, of which Expro were one.
And was that the plan at that point?
We probably were planning to go a bit longer, to be honest.
Okay.
But we did have a couple of interested parties that wanted to buy the business.
Expro one of them. And it kind of felt like, crikey, if we, given where the market is and given our options for internationalization. Yeah, and the past few years.
We're probably a little bit kind of war-struck by that. Yeah. It certainly felt, when you did the models, that this was the right way to go and grow this technology platform. Yeah. Expro in 64 countries, we were basically set up in one.
Yeah.
But we'd had a really good sort of hold on that market. The model is basically, replicate it.
Yeah.
We've got great facilities, great route to market for a global New York Stock Exchange listed business. Just crack on,
So Expro got in touch or got involved or followed that process through for a suitor to eventually take another company. What was the process there? So over the last few weeks, we've spoke to people on these podcasts who have sold to private investors or taken on investment from private investors or sold to PE. So what you've done is a wee bit different from them. So what was the process for?
Yeah, and we didn't have any private equity in the business.
Yeah.
Which was probably a product just of my co-founders' experience on that front, and the preference being, look, if we can sweat it out, let's sweat it out, which is what we did. And like I say, personally, it was quite challenging.
Yeah.
Not paying yourself minimum wage for a long time, but what it meant at that stage of what's next, when we've got a really good foothold in a market and a good global opportunity with a really kind of strong moat of IP around it, it gave us a lot more options, right?
Yeah.
You know, we weren't beholden to, you know, tags of, you know, big PEs or whatnot. We're able to kind of forge our own path, right?
Yeah.
So we were able to look at what's the right option for the business at this stage. We could have, of course, at that stage gone, you know, raised a bunch of money, gone private equity, and then, you know, tried it ourselves, which obviously is one route that we opted not to take on the basis that it's got a certain risk profile, and it's probably got a bigger exit eventually, but you know, it would have meant that we held all the risk.
Yeah.
We, you know, weren't as immediate on the route to market. Like, I mean, and ultimately played into that kind of decision-making process as to, well, actually, we've got a really, really viable option to go and globalize this with Expro, which is what we've done. You know, within just a few months of going through the acquisition, we were deploying Secure in the Gulf of Mexico, where we'd been chapping on that door for 6-7 years.
Yeah, but they've got the relationships, they've got the clients, they've got the projects. It's a lot easier for them to do it. It's not guaranteed, but it's still a lot easier than it is for you.
And I'd probably sell it as it happened like that. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was still significant effort involved in that. You know, circling back to all those original customers that we had spoken to over the last 6-7 years, to whom had said, love the technology, but Delta, who? What?
Yeah.
You guys are from Scotland?
Yeah.
You know, so
They know who Expro are.
absolutely. Expro's on every rig there, you know, running every cement head there.
Brand is there.
The brand is there. And this is an established, you know, kind of route to market, right? So that what we had to do was basically do the legwork of, look, you remember that technology that you said was really awesome?
Yeah.
It's now Expro, right? There's the sticker on the top of the door. I know you said you love it. You've already got a contract with us. We're already on your rig doing this. How about
And
it?
under Expro, were you then selling it, or were Expro's guys doing it?
Yeah, a bit of both, right? So I was almost like an internal salesman to the incumbent Expro team. This is Expro's technology now.
Yeah.
It's you know, the benefit, like, you know, trickling down into Expro meant that I was kind of selling it to the business development team. Say, guys, you guys speak to your customers about this.
Yeah.
They're gonna realize the value to them. They'll deploy it and they'll think you're awesome. So, you know, go ahead and proliferate. And sure enough, that's been somewhat successful, right? So, because like I say, we're in the Gulf of Mexico within 6 months post acquisition, and you know, 2 major IOCs had completely adopted it thereafter. So, what we'd been trying to do for 6-7 years was done in 6-7 months post Expro.
And the acquisition part itself, how difficult or timely was that?
Yeah. So once I guess an acquirer's decided that they're going to make the acquisition of whatever it is, then, you know, that was probably a 5-6 month process across Christmas for us. You know, light due diligence ends up being probably a little bit more than light due diligence when, you know, the actual rubber hits the road and, you know, they want to really kind of get down into the detail, but it's absolutely necessary. You know, you really want to make sure that every single closet has been checked for skeletons. You want to make sure that, you know, that I'm talking Expro, it's part of the entity that we're all one big happy family now. You got to do that due diligence, right? So
How many staff did you have at Delta Tech at that time?
Combination of contractors and part-times and full-times, around about 20.
Okay. And when Expro then took over, what happened there? Did these guys two pay over, or?
Yeah. And we've had relatively low attrition. You know, we've added obviously a bunch for mostly the Americas business where it's taken off. So there's obviously a whole bunch of new staff, but they're all woven into the fabric of the Expro org charts now. So, you know, there's a bunch over there that delivering, and there's of our legacy team, we lost probably 3 over the last 2 years. And like I say, we've obviously needed to add a whole bunch, mostly in the Americas. So, and as you know, and what we're trying to do now is basically just integrate it into the fabric of Expro. It's kind of business as usual. It's not like standalone where.
And is that where it's at now?
It's still a work in progress. I'll be honest. You know, it's a 8,500, 9,000 person company, $1.7 billion a year, New York Stock Exchange beast.
Yeah.
So, you know, which I know that Expro would probably consider themselves a small company when you kind of look at some of the other OFS players who are, you know, magnitudes obviously in excess of that, but it's still significantly bigger than you know, some of the other OFS options.
So day to day now, what's your job? What do you do?
Lot of internal sales, you know, continuing on that program of, you know, internally disseminating some of the learnings, the testimonies.
Do you lead a team or anything?
My old chart, which was, including all those consultants, contract was 20. I've now got one. So
is that one you?
No, I've got one below. I need more managing than myself. But.
Yeah. And how was your? Obviously, coming from a drilling engineer, not really a business owner previous to this. How was your? How would you describe your leadership skills?
Very enthusiastic. I'm sure many of the listeners of the podcast have probably been involved in those, the kind of insight style coloured charts of what sort of personality you are, the red, green, and yellow. I'm sure you know that as well. I'm a very heavy yellow with a bit of red.
Right.
That's my kind of colour quadrant. So ray of sunshine, I think, is the actual, part of that. So enthusiastic, always positive, sometimes blindly, but that's fine.
Always positive, even at the biggest challenges, or
desperately try and be. Yeah.
Does it hit you harder then?
I think you just kind of take it on the chin when you're maybe behind closed doors a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember times even sort of really building the whole team when it was, super, super difficult. And you just think, Christ, how am I going to get out of this sticky wicket? This is a tricky one. And, being on the sofa with my wife and tears streaming through my eyes thinking, this was bad, honey.
What have I done?
What have I done this for? But, you go out there and you come out the locker room and we're going to win. That was always the kind of the mentality. So you might kick each other and, like I say, in the locker room, but on the field, you're united and positive and leading with enthusiasm and, belief that we're going to win.
What about the culture within your business then? Not just your leadership or your enthusiasm, but what was the culture within the business?
Yeah, we had a roll the sleeves up and everybody mucks in kind of mentality, right? So, and that meant that anybody could. It was a very flat kind of structure in so much as, myself and my other co-founders, the leaders, were completely approachable from everybody. And we'd be, in the workshop with the team, doing peer review designs over, tables in the workshop as to, well, this might work, this might not work. And I'd say that the culture meant that it was a complete open door, top to bottom.
That sounds very, very exciting every day, like lots going on. How is that new? In your new position with Expro, where you're managing one person, and there's a whole team that's kind of running things. It's not really Delta Tech run by Tristam anymore. It's a huge company that's doing stuff that you don't even know what's happening in some cases.
Yeah, totally. And we try and emulate some of that through, getting the team together as often as we can for just a good old fashioned slice of pizza and how are you doing? And
do you still think the Delta Tech core team? Are they still the core team?
I'd say so, yeah. I'd say that syndicate, whilst woven into different teams, still exists, and there still very much is the, folk come into the office with the black and orange shirts.
They've just been beaten by Delta Tech.
Yeah, they're taking the Kool-Aid. But, we do try and emulate that, as one kind of partnership team as often as we can. And, peer reviews, like I say, design reviews. We like to kind of include everybody in these sort of things, right? It's not like a hierarchical approach of, you tell me what you know and then I'll take that to the next person. I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible and make everybody feel like they're participating as fruitfully as they can, because ultimately that's where people get their job satisfaction and enjoyment out of life from.
Yeah. And going back, you mentioned the really, really tough time when you're almost getting evicted, as well as the business is in its best place. How did all that come about? How did you get out of that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I've got four kids, but at the time I had two. When mid 2019, so we were kind of out the doldrums of major cash flow kind of constraints, where we just weren't able to pay ourselves. But like you'll know as an entrepreneur yourself, Kenny, there's you go and chap on the door of the mortgage broker or the bank.
Yeah.
And you explain to them that you've not paid yourself anything in the last 2 years, and your business accounts up to this point that you filed have all been loss-making because we've been in R&D. They go, crikey!
When is this turn around?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that puny little mortgage that you've got on that puny little house you shouldn't even have that, mate. You want to move house, bud? Good luck. And basically it was just a conversation between my wife and I of like, look, honey, we're moving house. We've got this little 3-bed semi in Kings Wells where we were tripping over ourselves as the four of us. It was rental or
and was there another kid on the way then, or?
Not yet, no. But even that was, kind of...
That was enough?
Enough, yeah. It was, little 80 square meter up and down type thing. It was, well, if we wanted to move, it was a rental basically.
Yeah.
And I had, when I was younger, I had great experience with rental. So I had kind of sold the vision to my wife of this is going to be fine. Don't
How
worry.
was it in reality?
The reality was when we went and found a place that was going to be suitable for us, we found a rental out in West Hill, and I was negotiating the lease with Aberdeen. My wife's born and bred. I've been here for whatever it was, 7 or 8 years at that stage, 15 now. We're here, right? This is us. We're locked and loaded.
Yeah.
I need a long lease to help me get a few self-assessments under and business accounts filed such that I'm able to access a mortgage again, because I literally cannot get any debt.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find a place which fit that bill, and one that came up was this one out of West Hill where they said, oh, the landlord's going to love you. They've had 3 different tenants in the last 3 years. They're over in the US, and that's what they're desperate for. Long lease. I was like, oh, fantastic. Well, sign me up for a big 4-year lease on that. Well, that'd be great. I remember when we got the tenancy agreement through, and there was a 28-day notice either way, and I said to the letting agent, I said, what's this nonsense all about? I thought you said 4 years was fine. Yeah. And they said, well, that's just the way that statute works, right? In the UK or the Scottish system right now, it's just 28 days notice either way. I said, no, scratch it. I want 4 years. And they said, well, that's just not going to work. So basically my wife and I sat down and said, we're just going to have to trust these guys, right? So that's what we did. We trusted them. So we sold out our little house. We moved out to West Hill, and I went to a friend's wedding the first weekend that we'd moved in. So we didn't unpack until the following weekend. And it was that weekend that I got an email from the letting agent saying, really sorry, landlord's changed his mind. He needs to sell the house. And I thought, you are kidding. This is a disaster.
So you're back on the market again.
Well, that was my knee jerk, right? My knee jerk was, honey, let's just drop it like it's hot. But she had been through the process of trying to find and said, no, Tris, we're here. This is us. Just make it work, because we love this place, and I loved it as well, right? Yeah. So we're basically trying to kind of negotiate with the landlord to basically allow us to stay, but it ultimately he needed to sell, so there was a for sale sign up at the front of the house whilst I was trying to figure out what to do.
How to live in it.
How to live in it. And the for let sign had only just come down. The hole was still in the ground where you could stick it. It was ridiculous. So anyway, a few months had gone by, and various different sort of tiers were had, and
chasing people away from the door.
Pretty much. But it ultimately came down to the point that we were needing to kind of get out in February. And this was, we moved in late 19, right? So we're talking February 2020 here.
So a couple of months.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think we were probably 6 all in by the time it got into that sort of stage. But February 2020 was also when COVID was starting to bite a little bit, right? And actually, the people that were looking to buy the house, they had kind of pulled out. So we were able to kind of renegotiate with the landlord at that stage, and it was ultimately coming back to an option to purchase, because I couldn't buy it now. So we were basically putting some framework in place. But then, of course, when March happened and the whole world stopped spinning,
that was it.
Lawyers were on very low, evictions had gone to 6 months, and I was like, whilst it had completely crippled my business, I was like, oh, at least I've got some breathing space and I'm not going to get evicted this month. But we literally did get the Chapter 11 from the Shire Council saying, well, we understand that you're getting evicted now. And I was like, oh God, this is bad.
Stress.
This is stressful, yeah.
How did your wife deal with that?
Pretty, I do as I'm told, right? Yeah. Do as I'm told. My suggestion was up sticks and jump. But no, she and ultimately it worked out was the important thing, right? But, she did sort of, keep us disciplined and keep us right and keep me pushing in that direction to ultimately go and get this. Because what ultimately happened was, whilst COVID kind of, decimated the business, decimated the market, we were able to then negotiate me to buy that house, right? And which happened a good year and a bit afterwards.
So still in that house now?
We're still in that house now.
You own the house now?
I own the house now, thankfully.
Well done.
So, and I've got now a massive reservation between and I'm going out of that place in a box, creaky.
So moving on now. So what's the plan for you personally and for Delta Tech Expro or Expo as it is going forward? Yeah, it's a nice question, Kenny, because it tees me up for explaining what I'm passionate about, which is the new technology side of things, right? So when we went through the acquisition process with Expro, I presented the
the information memorandum as you do in any kind of acquisition process, which is what my vision is for the business. And because Deltek was relatively immature, we're very mature in one market for the base technology, and the obvious plan was, we'll globalize that. That's kind of step number one. But step number two, and almost maybe 1.5 in parallel to step number one, is let's go and develop some more cool technology, right? Because we realized the C-cure and then figuring out, the heat sweep piece and then the buoyancy piece and then the next piece, it was like, we could do some really cool things with this.
And does Expro allow you to do more of that? I guess they've got more money in the bank, more weight with suppliers and clients, and they've got the ability to test more products than you would ever have, probably.
Yeah, that's it. And they've been really forthcoming with almost allowing us to test that R&D kind of pipeline. So so we've been going through that pipeline. So we've got some pretty awesome technology coming out in the V0 space, where we're able to kind of activate a barrier at the end of the liner or casing cement job that we're doing, so you can go straight into suspensions or just optimizing the whole process basically, and making it a safer process. We've got our first kind of full-blown buoyancy deployment of our technology, which is going to completely open up the envelope for aging assets to be able to access stranded pools of hydrocarbons, which is cool.
Fantastic.
And we're dovetailing our technology portfolio into a lot of the legacy Expro portfolio, which is making it a more compelling offering for the customer, because they don't have to go and make a procurement of maybe a cement head and a C-cure system separately. We can do it all together. So we're coining it our kind of like head to shoe solution, where it's a one-stop shop for, you tell us where you want the casing and we'll get it there for you and cement it in place, and it'll be in good shape. So not mixing and pumping the slurry, mind, but the technology.
You're buzzing about that.
But yeah, I'm really enthusiastic about that, right? I'm really enthusiastic about technology, developing solutions for customers, and that's where that's what really gets my juices flowing. Yeah.
And for somebody starting a business, what would be your words of wisdom for somebody who's been through it? Somebody starting a business in the energy sector, what would be your?
It would be, you cannot speak to your customer too much. You go and speak to them and speak to them and speak to them. Get their feedback. It was one of my early failings, was I didn't get enough feedback from my customers. That would be my sort of single piece of advice, is just speak to your customers. You within, don't piss them off, right? But just get their feedback. Make them feel like they are part of that journey, because they can be, and very much kind of steer the ship in the direction that they almost want it, which means that they're going to want to run it, right? They're going to want to go and deploy that. So being as open with your customers as you can will lead to success, I'd say.
Would you do it again?
Yeah, I'd do it again. I'm 37, right? So I've got, and 4 kids. So I'm going to be working until I'm an old man, I'm sure.
And do you think there'll be another Tristam Horn product out there at some point? No an Expro product, no nothing, just your own thought, your own idea.
Hey, look, never say never, Kenny, but until I'm not having really good fun, then it'll be a while. But Expro's doing a really good thing with us and letting us kind of go and develop some more technology and supporting that kind of globalization of the base one, right? So eventually I'm sure they'll get sick of me and they'll tell me to show me the door. But until then, I'd say I don't know, who knows when, but the short answer, I think there probably would be.
Yeah, perfect. Tristam, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Speak to you today.